second shot today. All right, so I can tell you a story about Vietnam, South Vietnam, right? I'm an English teacher there, training South Vietnamese soldiers. One of the schools I was at, I was a teacher, and basically we took turns doing guard duty, which seems so unbelievable because we were totally untrained, right? And after about 6 weeks, it'd be my turn and say, okay, you got to go out and guard the school with my rifle and just let us know if anything happens. So there'd be this school, two deckers, and we have a bunker at each end, and then there's an alley on the other side, a totally blind alley. And one American soldier at each end, Vietnamese soldiers, and I have to walk around the school at regular intervals. And at one spot, at one corner, once I found a dead body. A guy died there. People would be sleeping like right there in the alley and on the street. That was where they lived. There would be people there injecting what I believe was morphine or opium. I'm not sure exactly what it was, some sort of derivative. I could watch them. I said hello to them. I was always friendly to them because I knew they would, if it was a bomb or something, they would be the ones that would know if something was there, left there overnight. It's sort of like the type of thing where if everything was quiet and they weren't there, I would be worried, and I'd walk down the alley and walk around. One day there was a little boy who lived next door. He was on his front step and he had these cockroaches that he was playing with. They were like his pet. And I came up and I sort of smiled, tried to be friendly, but I think I scared him away. He picked up the cockroaches, put them in the matchbox, and went back inside and closed the door without even saying a word. No greeting at all. I guess I scared him off, being a soldier with a rifle. At the other end, there was one day there were a bunch of guys playing this game. It might have been mahjong, I'm not sure what, but they'd be sitting around in a circle on the ground playing the game. A couple of American soldiers, older Vietnamese guys that rode pedicabs, these cabs where they pedal the bike and you sit in the front seat type of thing. They would sleep in the pedicabs there, right there beside the school. And another day there was like a little accident in front of me and there was oil spill on the road. And now I got this oil spill. So bicycles are zooming by and cars. I have to keep everybody moving. Again, totally untrained, right? And there's this spill where people are sliding on. So I have to walk out in the middle of the road trying to keep people off the spill. And I don't know what to do, right? And I'm kind of stuck there. And I had to get a Vietnamese guy to come out and help me here, watch this spot. I go inside to tell them I need sand or something. I get a problem out there. I swear to God, this is true. The sergeant, American sergeant, got his feet on the desk. Feet on the desk. I mean, I wouldn't believe it if I didn't see it. And I said, yeah, I got people are sliding. Help me. I need sand or something. You got to help me out here. I'm doing guard duty. And he said, that's the Vietnamese problem. What are you talking? I didn't say, what are you talking about? I couldn't say anything because he was a sergeant. Finally, I convinced him to help me out so I could go back to my spot and guard the school while he went and found some sand to help throw it on this oil slick in front of the school. It's so, I mean, I tell that story and it seems so unbelievable to me, the lack of security, because a month before I went there, one of the schools was blown up. So it was a definite threat to be blown up or attacked at some point. Wow. And that was my job. Every 6 weeks or so, I'd have to guard the school just like all the other teachers.
My.
Jimmy, I have a Vietnam story from the other side of the Iron Curtain for you.
Okay.
How many of you know that the countries, aligned with the Soviet Union were also contributing soldiers on the North Vietnamese side? And there was a contingent of 500 Polish soldiers that were trained by the Soviets in Kazakhstan. You can't possibly imagine, I mean, the difference between Kazakhstan and Vietnam and the Mekong Delta. two completely different universes. And yet that was the area where they got trained. And nobody, of course, wrote about it, but I used to live in the northwest city of Szczecin. That's a seaport. And in a seaport, you see a lot of people from different walks of life. And I met two people that were in that 500 brigade in Vietnam. They both came back wounded. One lost half his calf. The muscle was just gone. And that's how he was found on the battlefield and brought back, you know, to Poland. The other one was shot badly in the thigh and had some major complications. But these people would tell me and us, the friends that were listening to their stories about the war, you know, what was going on. And one thing that they told us was that we knew the war was unwinnable, that it was lost, that the US was going to lose that war. And it was like in 68, 69. But why? Because he said never, there was only 500,000 Polish soldiers that went there, and the Vietnamese said no more. Nobody could could survive in that climate and in that type of war that the Vietnamese were waging. So they were just getting supplies and they were getting blood, mostly blood, but they didn't want to see one single person from all these countries. They were useless. And so that's completely, you know, something. It's a shock when you hear the news daily and they count every, you know, the B-52 shut down and all those things that were going on in official news media. And then you meet somebody who was actually there and tells you this.
Yeah, I never knew they were like Polish soldiers or any Eastern
Yeah.
Europe. I never knew about that.
Yeah.
I know the war on democracy, and Putin is following that same policy now when he took over.
Trauma to our family. My father died, and he lived in Chile. He was a Chilean. And when he died, I was married and we had a small child, a girl, and we decided to somehow use some of the money that was available in what amounted to his estate, I guess, and actually bring the whole family down there to visit our relatives. My mother had come back to the States after getting married, so forth. Anyway, so my sister and my wife, who's Filipino, was Filipino, and our child, our daughter, was about a couple of years old, and my mother and myself, we're the group that went down there. And so we visited for about a month and a half and stayed with my dad's brother and his mother, my grandmother, and Elena, mi abuela. And so anyway, I lived in Chile for 5 years, for the first 5 years of my life, and I'd never been back. So even though it had been my original language, I spoke, you know, no Spanish, very little, but somehow I began to pick it up. There's so many adventures that we had while we were there, but the one I want to talk about is we now while we're there, of course, we're riding on the buses and public transportation. There's always a soldier. This was this was back in the 70s, so it's, you know, there were still democratic elections going on, so it's certainly pre-Pinochet. And so we would go to the movie theaters, and we realized we started getting all these what looked like bites. And so we went and saw a doctor, and the doctor basically said, oh, those are flea bites. And they're just commonplace, and you get it by going to the theater and being on a bus sitting next to somebody. And I had these flea bites, and my, you know, daughter Lisa had these flea bites, and so forth. So he said, calm down, you know, because we were kind of thinking maybe we got smallpox. I mean, that's kind of what we thought, and we just wanted to rule that out. We didn't think it was. We'd had our smallpox vaccination. But back then in the 70s, smallpox was still pretty active in parts of the world. It had not been eradicated, which it eventually was. It had been pretty much eradicated in the United States, but not that long time. I didn't know any of this. Anyway, when we flew home, I think we flew to, first of all, Panama and stayed the night there. And then we flew into Chicago, O'Hare. And we lived in Illinois. And when we got there, as we were about ready to land at O'Hare, the stewardess, flight attendant came by and was kind of making sure we were all, seat belted up. And she noticed I was holding my daughter, that she had all these little red marks on her arm. And she said, "What is that?" And I told her. And anyway, the next thing you know, we land and everybody is told to stay on the plane. And what happens is that they started taking us off one by one. I mean, kind of, and everybody had to go in and get signed up, registered. But we, our family, I and my daughter and my wife and my sister and my mother, were all now put into this room at which basically we didn't know what was going on, but they told us that they suspected that we had smallpox. And no matter how much we told them we didn't, and that we'd been checked, they didn't trust the Chilean doctors, apparently. And I remember when they were examining my daughter in particular, because she had kind of the worst of it on her arms. I was in this little room and I could see a picture, a poster on the wall, and it showed young people and older people with smallpox. I mean, horrible pictures, of ulcerating sores and, near death. And so the people that were screening us were just on high alert and anxiety, that they were not going to let any possible smallpox re-enter the United States. So the result was they didn't know what it was. So they basically locked us up. I mean, we were in this room and it had some beds in it, and we had to stay overnight until these samples were taken and they could be examined. And so we stayed the night. What was odd about this room was that it was actually two rooms separated by a glass. And on the other side of the room was a Hispanic man. He was a young Mexican man who had apparently got on the plane. I guess we went to Mexico City. That's where we went. And he got on in Mexico City. And for some reason, he was the only person on the plane that he didn't have a smallpox vaccination. Somehow he was allowed, he was going to be, he got to the United States, he got on the plane, and they thought he might have been exposed to smallpox. So he was quarantined as well as we. And I remember my mother, who is a college professor and a fairly reasonable person, at one point, because there were bars on all the window, and we were examining that in these tight metal screens. And she said, "Well, is there some way, Leo, that you could just get that out and we'll get out and we'll get in because our town is about 60 miles away, and, get a taxi and we'll just basically escape." And we considered this for a while, but decided it probably, had too many risks involved. Meanwhile, what we found out is that the young Mexican man thought he was going to die. He didn't speak any English and nobody was translating to him. And all he heard was smallpox. And so he thought, "Oh my God, I've come to the United States and I'm going to die." And so we couldn't talk to him because you couldn't hear across this glass, thick glass. But my daughter, we had a little chalkboard for her, for her to draw on. And we pulled that out with chalk and we started writing to him in Spanish. My mother knew Spanish very well. And finally, he was able to get it that we didn't have smallpox, therefore he didn't have smallpox, and he was going to be okay. Well, finally the doctors arrived and they said, "We have checked your, the samples and you don't have smallpox." Of course, we knew this. And at this point, everybody's very apologetic. And they hired they had gotten a bus, a very swanky bus with beautiful, nice, soft, cushiony seats. and there was only 5 of us on this bus, and they drove us to 60 miles, to wherever we had to go. Maybe I got this a little wrong, because we must have, no, somebody was supposed to pick us up. And so they drove us all the way to our home in DeKalb, 60 miles away. But before we left, we would not get on the bus until we were sure that this young man was safely going to, meet the people that he had come to visit. It was family members from Mexico living in Chicago. And so we got a taxi. We taught, my mother, of course, could speak fluent Spanish, and got him situated in, and we sort of waved him goodbye as he drove off, make sure that they had the right address and everybody was okay. And we got on the bus. And that was just a very strange experience of coming back home after a month and a half, couple of months actually being away, and being treated like a pariah, being treated as somebody that needed to be kept at arm's length distance. And we had this curious connection with this young Mexican man. I've forgotten his name. And all that has stuck with me for the rest of my life, in terms of if you're on the other side, how you can get treated. Because
this is kind of story in a way. It's something I wrote about 3 years ago. That's the premise here is that the Beats are having a seance, but not all of them are dead. Now they are, so Michael McClure and Ferlinghetti was still alive. And that's I want to read this because of Ferlinghetti's just recent passing. Something to be pretty apropos. This is called Missing Beats. Chimeras in the deep chemical fog above the Pulaski Skyway tonight, chanting vainly to be heard amid lights and traffic teeming in brain smog. Untethered, they flee dreamily north to hang out for hours in fugazis, wired and waiting for Ferlinghetti, who still cannot send a ghost forth. Ginsberg lives in Newark memories, now of Naomi incorporeal, her anguish sending red police signals as back in 1953. So he seeks some Greenwich Village cafe where in a naked poetry reading, he observes a wraith of Elise bleeding, again in his mind's stark replay. Meanwhile, no one has spotted Kerouac, either in the gray sea mist of Big Sur or inside some bebop club on Bleecker, where fading notes fold into black. He types again his vagabond lines of thumbing through the lower 48, his manic visions slumming until late on Benzedrine and cherry wine. And no spirit here can spy Cassidy, the ever-truant hipster demigod, racing a sleek Chrysler like a hot rod into the blind Kansas prairies. Across the continent, Ferlinghetti and McClure in North Beach listen still to subterranean saxophones settle with night fog into poetry.
Sure. Talking about Nicanor Parra, that was very interesting. Let me see, where am I? Did I just lose the connection? No, I didn't. Okay. Something flipped. No, I'm right here. Yes, Nicanor Parra, very good. I actually met him once. That's one of my stories. I met him once in Chile when I was there. This was in 1999. So he was, let's see, he was born in 1914. So he was only 85. He was a spry 85. He was giving a reading at the University of Chile, and it was his Poemas Verdes. And after the reading, I went up to him and I spoke to him a little bit, and I said I very much admired his work, and would he sign this book of his for me? And so I gave him the book that I had, and he signed it. But when I looked at it, you know what he had signed it? He had signed it as Neftali Reyes Basso Alto. He signed it with Pablo Neruda's actual name. He did not sign it as Nicanor Parra. He signed
Wow.
it as, I think he did Neftali Ricardo Reyes Basso Alto, which is Neruda's actual name. So I went, whoa, okay. I knew he had a Jones for winning the Nobel Prize, and he never did, and Neruda did, and he remained ever envious of that. And I think that's one of the reasons he lived to 104, because he was determined to win that prize. So I would like to read, I have my alter ego, Yulene, loves interacting with other poets' alter egos. And she has decided that Nicanor Parra's anti-poet is an anti-alter ego. I don't know, would any of you like to hear a poem of his in Spanish?
Sure.
Sure.
I have
Yeah.
this is the poem upon which this poem is based. Okay. It's called Un Hombre, de Nicanor Parra. La madre de un hombre está gravemente enferma. Parte en busca del médico. Llora. En la calle ve a su mujer acompañada de otro hombre. Van tomados de la mano. Los sigue a corta distancia, de árbol en árbol. Llora. Ahora se encuentra con un amigo de juventud. Años que no nos veíamos. Pasan a un bar, conversan, ríen. El hombre sale a orinar al patio, ve una muchacha joven. Esta noche, ella lava los platos. El hombre se acerca a la joven, la toma de la cintura, bailan vals, juntos salen a la calle, ríen. Hay un accidente, la muchacha ha perdido el conocimiento, el hombre va a llamar por teléfono, llora, llega a una casa con luces, pide teléfono, alguien lo reconoce. Quédate a comer, hombre. No, ¿dónde está el teléfono? Come, hombre, come, después te vas. Se siente a comer, bebe como un condenado, ríe, lo hacen recitar, recita, se queda dormido debajo de un escritorio. Okay, well, that was Pablo Neruda. No, that was Nicanor Parra's poem. That was his, and I don't know how many of you could follow that all in Spanish.
It's an
You
English
have it. All
translation.
right. So you've got that. That's great. Yes.
All right, I have a
Okay. So what happened was that Yulene, she basically wanted to reply to Nicanor Parra. So this was Yulene's response. And it's a poem called Yulene Antipoética. Una mujer antipoética. And the epigraph is from Nicanor Parra's poem that you just heard. La madre de un hombre está gravemente enferma, which is a man's mother is very sick. Yulene's black-sheeped Uncle Bob is very drunk. Yulene goes to the local rescue mission to fetch him, then to the ER, where doctors can't refuse him. She's sobbing. In front of the mission on Skid Row, she sees her crazy boyfriend, Al, in the company of another woman. They're pushing a shopping cart crammed with all the woman's worldly goods. Al strokes her hand, presses some money into it. Dollar bills? A voucher for buffet breakfast at the bingo hall? Pamphlets for sinners proclaiming repent or die in flaming scarlet letters? Yulene follows a few steps behind them, lurking from light pole to light pole. She's wiping her eyes. Now she runs into a pal from high school. It's been years since they've seen each other. They go to Starbucks. They talk, laugh, sip lattes that leave foam mustaches on their upper lips. Yulene goes down the hall to her favorite room, and as she rises from the porcelain throne and goes out, She spots a famous younger poet, all in black leather with spiky tousled hair and eyebrow rings. It's evening. He looks so dangerous. James Dean checking his text messages. Dean sidles over to him, takes him by his bicep with its Amy Winehouse tattoo. They shimmer down the aisle between the travel mugs and gleaming 12-ounce bags of espresso roast. They ease out into the street together. They smirk and pout. They're so postmodern. Suddenly, there's an accident. Bicycle messengers, such reckless maniacs these days. The young poet's in a coma. Yulene goes looking for someone with a cell phone. She's choked with sobs. She comes to a condo complex with party lights twinkling in the clubhouse. She asks to use a phone. Somebody in the party recognizes her. Hey, come on in and try the fajita chicken wings. No, where's a cell phone? Hey, stay, try some brie and a glass of Santa Carolina Chardonnay, then be on your way. Yulene perches on a bar stool with an overflowing plate. She sips her Santa Carolina like one of Dante's damned. She grimaces hearing herself laugh at their corny jokes. They get her to declaim a poem by Neftali Reyes Basso Alto and her favorite lines from Baudelaire's Le Fleur du Mal. She recites these. She ends up sleeping under the pool table with Pablo, the building manager's wrinkly jowled Sharpay. And that is in memoriam Nicanor Segundo Parra Sandoval, 1914 to 2018.
Can I ask you a quick question? Didn't Pata end his poems with "I take back" something like "I take back everything I said," right?
Yes, he did. Yes.
Oh, really? I think it would all come back to me.
Leopoldo, on page 69
Oh, yeah.
is the poem.
Yes.
Aha.
Yeah.
Me retracto de todo lo dijo. I take back everything I've said. Before I go,
Yes.
I'm supposed to get a last wish. Generous reader, burn this book, if not at all what I wanted to say, though it was written in blood.
Yeah.
It's not what I wanted to say. No, lot could be sadder than mine. I was defeated by my own shadow. My words took vengeance on me. Forgive me, reader, good reader, if I cannot leave you with a warm embrace. I leave you with a forced and sad smile. Maybe that's all I am. But listen to my last word. I take back everything I've said. With the greatest bitterness in the world, I take everything I've said. I could add a couple of words along the lines of winning or not winning a Nobel Prize. And this would be kind of even, it could be a poem, how not to win a Nobel Prize. You all probably know Czesław Miłosz, who got the Nobel Prize in Poetry in 1980. And then it was his call to make when the time came. And rather than naming Zbigniew Herbert, he named Wisława Szymborska. Zbigniew Herbert quarreled with Czesław Miłosz. It's documented. They had a falling out shortly before Miłosz was to report to the Swedish Academy.
Oh, no.
So if you're looking for a way not to get a big prize, it's been already tested and it works.
Don't fight with the most recent winner of the prize. Especially if he writes in your language and you know, who else is going to nominate you, you know?
Yeah, nobody else.
Okay.
couple of things. One thing that I want to share with you is this stupid, funny poem that I wrote one day because I needed to amuse myself. And it's titled Once Upon. Once upon the Republic, a filthy man, a filthy rich man, a very filthy rich man became president. Once upon the Republic, a filthy liar, a filthy big liar, a very filthy big liar became president. Once upon the Republic, 74 million voted for a very filthy rich man to be president for the second time. But so that's kind of self-amusement in the times of COVID. But I wanted to share with you a couple of poems that come from my collection I wrote a few years ago. And they are musical poems, they are iambic pentameters, and they are rhymed. They are the classical ones. American scientist a few years back, about 10 or 15 years ago, had an article about Mozart's starling. Mozart had a bird. He walked into a pet shop in Vienna and he bought starling because starlings, just like mockingbirds, have fantastic mimicking ability. And so the bird would sit on Mozart's shoulder and they would compose. And there are pieces of Mozart's that incorporate starlings' musings. But they don't live long. And so after 3.5 years, the bird died. And Mozart wrote the poem and then whistled. And when Mozart whistled in Vienna, everybody came. So half the city came and they all had a procession, went to the funeral and buried the bird. And Mozart wrote a poem in German and that he read at the funeral. And I tried to pattern my poem a little bit on Mozart's. It's a completely different take, of course, but this is what happened. So Mozart's starling. How just a bird, if nothing else, could steal her Mozart's high romance while being perched on his shoulder? Surely not to be a scolder, to whistle into Mozart's ear a tune before it disappeared and take concerto for a spin around the room or on a whim, just to mimic, to entertain. A starling can be pretty vain, and to avoid a disaster must be cast in alabaster. I'd like a poem now and then, exacted in her Mozart's pen, and be his dear Vogelstar, either up close or from afar. And in return, ein Vogelstar will praise his master's every bar, and each concerto he composed, either unfinished or supposed. Ein Vogelstar is starling in German, by the way.
Right.
So that's one of the poems from that collection. Another one is I like to share with you is, and that has to do with poetry, so I think that will be of some interest to you. There are some poetic references going back to the 19th and 20th centuries, France, and then Italia, of course, Dante. Miss Violin could take on a chin when her shapely chin would get pinned before the bow touched her chords. Her life strings would tremble. No words could express her infatuation with her own sound. If damnation was a price to pay for illusion, heaven and hell were in fusion, both out of reach, beyond reason, dancing madly the four seasons from primavera to inverno, from the high heaven to inferno. Miss Violin, a voice of Eden, would sort out believers from heathen, unless she was ready to sell the world for one season in hell.
And it goes like this. Bless your love. Bless your love of solitude in garden joyous reveries, your dirt-stained hands in communion, the daffodils bowed as prayer, the hum of the dragonfly concerto drowning the howling horns of hurry up. Bless your love of quiet words bound fast on curved sheets, endless worlds within pages, your well-scrubbed hands softly turning, submersed in attention to the stillness required to decipher the symbols between the empty white spaces. Bless your love of restless curiosity, no recipe too tame for whimsy, spices, herbs, and ginger root trickling through your fingers, falling in fragrant concoctions, served in wooden bowls to earnest supplicants of your monastic order. Bless your love of this supplicant, standing here before you, for whom too much of anything is cause for noisy celebration, leaving us no choice but to balance unquivering tight ropes strung high above the clamor. There is no safety net below, save your dirt and books and novel concoctions, where you return again and again to your life of curiously quiet solitude. And that, I must admit, is another one of a many series of love poems to the love of my life, which kind of got me started back again in poetry on a Valentine's Day a long time ago, and eventually led to this night.
Okay. This is actually, I'm using the second person here, but it's actually me. It's about a really sort of noisy, just a apartment I lived in Greenwood back in the 90s. It was just, I was glad to get out of there. It's called Cuckoo in the Wrong Habitat, Greenwood, Seattle, 1990s. Psych, cuckoo, the 12-year-old girl upstairs chirped as he closed the door to laughing street eyes after coming home from work. A strange bird, he lived solitary in the thickets of imagination, in the dusty world branches of squandered time. His brain began to seethe with the staccato aria of a yellow-billed call that knew the lament of an approaching storm and the black specks on the face of the sun overhead. It wound around his thoughts like the plain children's voices, engines turning over, stereos throbbing in the boombox alley next to his window. Outside his door, two acolytes of Beavis and Butthead listened to his telephone conversation after getting bored one day with skateboarding down the hall. Between pages here. Okay. He should have known better than to live here among these desert storm-clad denizens whose TVs lit up with professional wrestling, whose parents turned the dial to red, white, and blue country music, whose sons swaggered like Kid Rock. Should have known better, they would realize from hearing him use big words that he had a library card, but the rent was cheap. So he could only wait until his wallet fattened and then fly south with a prescription for a tricyclic in his beak.